Okay. So just get your feet in a good position and weight a little bit forwards. Start to feel your hips, lower back, buttocks just beginning to sort of drop back a little bit. Feeling the settling in the pelvis. And whatever images and ideas are useful to you with the various images and ideas that I present to you about this. See if you can remember doing those that was like tense and release exercises in the hips and lower back, that moment of releasing. And one of the reasons I do it like that, and you can try it if you want, it's up to you, but you sort of grip and release, but you do it with the lower back. You grip and release, and grip and release, and just paying attention to that moment of release. Obviously, you know, when we're not doing it like that, when we're just looking for it here, it's a much subtler feeling, but it kind of can give you a way in to this feeling of movement downwards through your body. But also give yourself time to let that happen. And then thinking about the center of your body between hips and waist, from the point of view of turning. So you can see here, actually, if you look at my shoulders, they're not moving very much at the moment. I'm just trying to give my back a chance to warm up. My feet will disappear. But then what I will start to do is I turn to there in the center of the body, the lower down chin, and then round about here where my finger is, I may just start to turn a little bit further. And then round about here, maybe further again. And it's not that set, it's not that rigid. It's just this sense that as I begin to move, as the blood and the energy begins to circulate and my body warms up and so on and so forth, there's just that little bit more space that I can move into. I started to think about this when I watched my Chen style teacher, Karel, do a particular movement, and he was just sort of doing some stuff on his own. This is on a residential. I was watching him, and there's this thing about, you know, shoulders in line with hips. And as he moved, I noticed that his shoulders were going way beyond the hips, which I thought was a bit annoying at the time, because having been told shoulders must stay in line with the hips, and to see somebody so senior to you not keeping their shoulders in line with their hips does kind of make you think. So when he finished, I went up to him and I asked him about this. And he went, "Oh, was I?" And I said, "Yes, you were." And he went back and he did the movement again. And then he did it again, and you could see him thinking about it. And then he looked over at me and says, "It feels okay." So I think a lot of these guidelines for postures, movements, and so on and so forth are actually there to help us develop an intuitive sense of what goes on in our body and what is appropriate, if you like. And that's why I've started to talk to people about being aware of this sense of space within the body, space to move. And if there isn't that space to move, you shouldn't be moving, or at least if there isn't much space, then you should be just touching the edges of it. It's like if you walk into a room and there's a little bit of bare floor, and then there's loads of boxes stacked around. You don't just walk in and try and punch through the boxes, because it'll just be exhausted. If you want to get in further, you have to move some of the boxes around and things like that. So it's the same kind of idea, and that has to be done very carefully and very patiently. And it's not consistent. It's not going to be the same from one day to the next, even 1 hour to the next. So your awareness of this is crucial. You know, where are the spaces? Well, what I've just described, you know, you might find, for instance, that whereas you can't get that sense of the middle here, the solar plexus, the middle dantian turning a little bit further beyond the lower dantian, you might find that you can turn low and middle together, but when it comes to the upper, get a little bit more movement and so on. So learning to know when to stop the movement, how to do that without it being a tightening. So recognizing the signs, kind of, you know, like put your foot on the brake when you're driving. You're not stopping, but you're maybe coming to a junction or something like that. Those kind of things. Once again, developing the same kind of awareness around what's happening within the inner landscape of our body, as we might apply to walking into a room, driving a car, going down the shops, or, you know, just walking down the road. And then just raising your arms. As I've said before, this is, I think these are good exercises, these initial exercises, to help us with that. They're not complicated at all, and they're fairly free form. You know, it's not like you have to think, oh God, what, you know, is it this with the hand or whatever. And as always, it begins that other process of drawing your attention into your body, quietening your attention. And then just letting your hands drop down. Moving your weight forwards and backwards. In Tai Chi Chuan itself, when we do partner work, one of the things that you're trying to be aware of is the other person's space and what's happening in their, how can I put it? What's happening in their body? Have they gone beyond the appropriate limit? Because if they've gone beyond the appropriate limit, they're out of line, and it's easier to push them. So once we've developed that awareness internally, we can begin to take it outside as well. You know, how do we walk down the road when it's crowded, or whatever? And with that, what are the movements, the dynamics in any particular situation, both internally and externally, and how do they interact? So again, this is another one of those exercises where we can do this, and you get a very quick feedback. And don't be shy of letting that happen. There's always a certain amount of trial and error, and this is true in the partner work as well. You know, I've often stood there and thought, well, what happens? Oh, that's what happens. I get pulled over or something like that. We can use sensible mistakes as a way of learning. And then bringing your arms into the movement. And this is also quite interesting because it's quite difficult to keep the arms in their correct position. In other words, following the movement and just reaching into that space around us. If I go forwards and rest in the balls of my feet, I let my arms come through and then extend my arms out further, that then begins to pull me over. And remember, before you even start to register that you're stumbling, there will be stiffening up, there will be tightening up within your body. And that's really what we're trying to avoid. And then just, once you've got a sense of, yeah, I'm in that space, and I'm moving there, and so on and so forth, you can then begin to slowly register the changes within your body, the movements, the flows, the energy. Again, a useful exercise, this. For people who just come in, I've been talking about really getting a sense of how far you're able to move without straining. So hips sinking down, knees soft, pelvis hanging down as always. Helps to remove some of the tightness, some of the restriction on movement within your body. And then we just let the flow, the movement, the energy fill that space. And then if we want to be able to extend that space, which is a worthy aim, it's that same feeling of release. I've talked about tightening the back and releasing, or you can do it with the shoulders. You can hold your shoulders up and then go, and that starts to make you aware of the feeling of releasing. So if I go forwards here, for instance, and I'm a bit kind of, I'm a bit there, I could just pull back. I think, well, I'd quite like to be here. And maybe, if I can get that feeling, if I can identify where the tightening is and release there, I may get a little bit more movement. Not always. There are always going to be limits. This doesn't turn you into some kind of superhero who can defy the rules of gravity. And then just coming to settle slightly behind the balls of your feet, let your hips drop back and rooting down. Once again, some of these ideas, I think, are certainly things that I've benefited from working out in chair-based exercises. Carry on with the movement that you're doing, but for people, for instance, who aren't aware, you could, not just you do this now, but it's something you can do at home. The exercise we've just been doing, swaying in the river, could be done like this. And then you don't really have to bother too much about the weight of your body. Make sure you're able to sink your weight and don't go too far forwards. But notice what's happening in your back. If I'm holding my back tight, I can get to here. If I can get to here and the release in my back, I can get to here, and so on and so forth. We gradually build up one way or another ways of working that fit in with this idea of 4 ounces moving 1,000 pounds, and putting that together with the realization that we do a big movement from the basis of working with smaller movements. So as always, the emphasis initially in this exercise is, as the name suggests, the exercise is called rooting down, and it's really focuses on this feeling all the way through the body. And I've talked about the hips releasing, but actually, you'll soon discover that even that is too limited. We want the releasing through the whole of our body. Then you can begin to notice the movement upwards, as though you're on a trampoline, and usually is being aware of just that moment, just resting there and waiting until you feel the push up. I'll just get myself more center screen. If you're looking for another focus for this exercise, I might suggest, well, you may have heard me talk about it, for something called the inner orbit, or the microcosmic orbit, which is to feel the movement actively going up through your spine, vertebra by vertebra, through your neck, over the crown of your head. And in fact, the channel, the meridian, would finish at the tip of your, at the top of your mouth. And then the downward movement from the lower part of your mouth down the middle of the body, and meeting the original channel at the base of the torso. In between them, that makes quite a nice little, quite refreshing visualization. Somebody once described the feeling up the spine as though somebody were just rolling a marble up your back. I think that's quite a good description. And particularly if you're feeling a bit kind of tired, if you're feeling a bit like that in your feeling, that can be quite a refreshing approach. Either sort of, if you're interested in the Meridian system, that's a useful introduction. But even if you're not, just see it as a sort of extra focusing of your attention. And then your hands come down and out to your sides, wild goose. I start with these exercises, rooting down, wild goose, heart in the clouds, and even dragon plucks the stars from the sky that follows on, because they can all involve this movement, this active sinking and pushing up through your hips. So again, they're quite, I mean, in a way, they're quite kind of crude, because really what I'm talking about when I talk about that downward movement and that upward movement is the movement through your body. So when we come to things like pushing in 4 directions, you're going to want to maintain this stance, and hopefully going down to here means that here is becoming more comfortable, so that we can still feel that downward movement, that space, without actually having to work the legs in this way. Not that there's anything wrong with working the legs, but. And then heart in the clouds. One more time. Good. And then Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So this exercise can be done either with this stance without moving your hips up and down, but notice that I am sinking back. I'm not standing like this. Or you can do just as you were doing with the previous exercises, letting the hips drop back significantly, your knees hinging. And a third thing you can do is to start off like this, and then when you can feel that those mechanical connections, those physical connections in the body, slowly reduce the amount of movement in your hips until you come to rest, but see whether you can still detect that internal movement. And I think that's quite a useful exercise if you want to develop this sense of movement as a constant within the body that doesn't necessarily depend on hips rising and falling, but is of course requiring space within the body for the downward and the upward movement. Now, just changing. Once again, if the inner orbit image worked for you, just retrieve it from your sort of recent memory, because it's quite a nice way of ensuring, well, not ensuring, but of helping, I should say, to maintain this lovely open, upright posture that we look for in Tai Chi. Remember, that's done without a strain. This is not a kind of grip your muscles and get into a fight with the pull of gravity. Carell, who I mentioned earlier, often uses the phrase, imagine your head floating up. One more time. And again, the familiarity with the exercises that we're doing and their relative simplicity lends themselves very well to actually exploring these ideas. Changing this time. And then you can add the turn if it's comfortable, remembering that you're moving within that space within your body. And then switch sides. The two channels that I mentioned, the upward movement through your back comes with a pathway referred to as the governor meridian. The downward movement is the conception vessel. Everything gathers downwards through that. Most of these meridians are paired. They are the major routes for energy flowing through the body. You can add the turn this time. And there are 6 pairs of meridians that are directly related to what we think of as organs. It's not quite accurate. 3 in the legs, 3 in the arms, and they all sort of go deeper in the body. Now, changing rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. There's also what they call the 8 extra meridians, which are like less specific, but are often regarded as being like the lakes that feed the rivers being the organ meridians. And the governor meridian, the conception channel, are classified with those, but unlike those, they're quite commonly cited in Chinese medicine, in acupuncture, which the other 8 meridians aren't used as commonly, although there are massage techniques for reaching them. Yeah. And then polishing the table. And then one more time. And rest. Try not to think of the meridians as objects in the way that, say, a blood vessel is. They're more like patterns of movement. They're fairly consistent, and you know, kind of Chinese medicine is very, very precise. But you couldn't sort of like open up somebody and find a meridian in that sense. One theory is that they exist within the folds and the changes of what we call the fascia, the muscle skin that extends through the whole of the body, and which appears to have certain electromagnetic properties, crystalline properties in any case. But even there, you know, it's a bit like almost like a river system, but they don't quite construct the riverbanks in that sense. So we can't understand them in the way that we might understand, say, the nervous system or you know, the whole blood transport system or the lymph nodes or whatever. They're not, you can't remove a meridian in that sense, but you can block it. Coming back to the parallel stance, let's do stretching between heaven and earth. Remembering, yeah, I think you've all done this with me before, but we start off in a fixed stance. Weight is 50% in each leg. And then if it's appropriate for you, you can begin to move your weight a little bit. You'll see that when I do this, you can see my hip is very quickly going out of line. So when I start to move, I generally go into a wider stance. Yeah, and then after a while of doing that, we start to bring the foot in like this, and then bring the foot in and lift, and build it up in those stages. Don't try and go from here to here. Eventually you'll be able to. You won't have to think about it, but it's not the correct way to start. So just there's no pressure to move on, but I'll take you through all of those stages. Hands in front of you. Turn your left hand palm down. Rotate your right hand so the arm is spiraling upwards. Push down. And keep the hands in front of the body. Turn your hands palm in. They meet in front of your belly and push out again. Once again, you can do this with that sinking down. I'll exaggerate it. I wouldn't necessarily go down this far for this exercise and push up. Or you can just feel your hips dropping back. The advantage of actually doing it physically like this, the up and down movement, is you do get that extra little bit of conditioning for your legs, which is always nice. Stretching between heaven and earth. As far as you're able to, make sure that the bottom hand faces palm down towards the earth, top hand up towards the heavens. This is an exercise I've often seen referred to as affecting the stomach and spleen. It's there. It's on the right side of your body and underneath the ribs. And it's certainly true, I think, that I can definitely feel that when the arms do this, this is the area of the body that is obviously being worked, or one of them. But then it also seems to work on the other side. I'm really not at all sure why this is considered to be just the stomach and spleen. The meridians associated with those organs, the stomach goes up here, just sort of like either side really of the center line of your body, and ends up kind of at either side. I'm not trying to give you accurate instructions. The gallbladder meridian goes up through the side of your body, and you can feel that being worked as well. And again, the liver comes up more to the front, but more to the edge of the body, more and more up in to the chest. So I don't think it's necessarily which meridians are being sort of like very expressly worked. So now just moving across, you can come down in the middle here. This is how I quite like to do it. I quite like to feel that real push up here. And then, if you wish, step in, raise the empty heel, bring the foot in, and then if you're doing the physical push up. Don't lock the knee, don't go right up, keep that softness in your knee, step out, drop down, come across. And be careful of your knee. That dropping down on one leg is quite strong in knee and hip, so And then, of course, if you wish, raising the knee. If you find that you're a bit wobbly on that, as with any other time we do this, really the thing to do is to try and focus on that in your own practice without the complication of doing this exercise or something like that. Stretching between heaven and earth. Okay, check out. The stretching movements do, again, not just stretching between heaven and earth, but the movements, I won't use the term stretch, extending movements are said to be quite good for digestion, perhaps because they do open up that area a little bit. You have to do it very gently, but sometimes I've seen things like stretching between heaven and earth recommended as an exercise to do after you've eaten. I wouldn't do it too soon after you've eaten. You need to, but yeah, just a simple movement like that. Don't do it too much. But the exercises give us a sense of that opening in the body. Another one might be this one, circling palms and so on and so forth. Ones that are done in an upright position, so not rowing a boat in the middle of the lake, but just ease out the body. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's actually a stretch. I don't think a full stretch is advisable just after you've eaten. Now put one foot forwards, transferring your weight. Again, you can just wait until you feel the push back, push forwards. And in that moment of waiting, that's when you're really thinking about that releasing. In terms of this exercise, I would say principally hip, knee, ankle, lower back. Raising your toes and your heel. A lot is said about these exercises, and some of it is fairly consistent. The thing about stretching between heaven and earth with the stomach is quite common in my experience. Others less so. Quite often it's hard to sort of get any direct verification for that. But sometimes you'll read something and then you do the exercise, oh yeah, it does. But then that's partly because it's been suggested to you. And I think what that shows is the value of awareness. And I think in many cases, we can redirect what's happening in an exercise internally through that change in intent. Stepping in. So sometimes, you know, when people ask me, can I recommend an exercise for X, Y, or Z? The first thing I want to think about really is, well, what exercises do I think these people know? Where are they most comfortable? Because there's no point giving somebody an exercise for, I don't know, a stiff shoulder if they don't know the exercise, because they're going to have to learn it first. So I'd rather give them something that I think is significant, for you know, does actually work the shoulder, but which they can do, so they can focus on it. The next person might get a different exercise or the same exercise for a different reason. And then on the other side, it's not totally like that. Obviously, some exercises do lend themselves well to certain things. This is clearly a good exercise for the legs. We can see that, we can feel that. And yet I might also, you know, if somebody came to me and said, well, you know, they've got this sticky feeling in their back and they can't, you know, their spine is stuck or something like that. If they did this exercise, I might say, well, do this exercise, make sure you're sinking down, and then just concentrate on the fluidity of the movement in your back. That's just off the top of my head. That's not a prescription. And then raising your toes and your hip. I'm scratching it. Don't. It's just me scratching, not. And then stepping in. These ideas, and you know, this is what I'm saying about, you know, the significance of intent, I think relate to what in Western medicine is referred to as placebo. This is something that used to be quite dismissed in Western medicine, but it's now recognized as actually a significant healing force. And then stepping through. Once again, I'm not suggesting that everything that happens to us is just down to our minds or lack of awareness or anything like that. And then going back. Rather, it's about just realizing the potential for how we can help ourselves and progress. When we go through this process of bringing our attention into that inner landscape of the body. And then shake out. I don't want anybody to be feeling that they're somehow failing if they can't think the right thoughts and make themselves well. It's not. It's not that simple. But you know, the fact that we can achieve something is really important. So have your right foot forwards, sink your weight back, turn your hands forwards. Bird folds its wings. Let's refer back to something I said in the last online class, standing class, about how we can change our perception of things. And there's a visualization technique called the inner smile, which uses the image of a smile. And this is another way of experiencing that feeling of release, because when you smile, your face relaxes and releases. Something to do with how many muscles, I can't remember exact reason. And so the technique involves imagining somebody smiling at you, and we tend to smile back when somebody smiles, and then taking that idea in one way or another through various regions of the body. So if you've got an area that is tightening up and you can't quite do anything about it, try smiling at it. I know it sounds a bit silly, but actually it can be very effective. Now change into fisherman castanet. The original idea of the inner smile was to release tightness and stiffness and blocked energy in various parts of the body, usually before you try and go to sleep. We will accumulate those blockages during the day. It's quite a nice little one. If anybody's interested, I do have both written and audio versions, which you're welcome to make use of. If you're interested, do get in touch. Now change into pushing a wave. And then repulsing the monkey. And with these exercises, like repulsing the monkey, it can get a bit confusing. And so we want our response to be to bring our attention more into the center of the body, not to flap around with our arms. So breaking it down, move your weight back. And as you move your weight back, you leave the front hand behind so the arm straightens. You let in your case, the left hand drop down. Then you turn, and that swings the rear hand up to your shoulder, and you can just rotate in the upper arm if you wish. You come forward. Notice that my body's still at an angle, and then when I turn, that moves the arms for me. When I turn the opposite way, I'll let the hand come up. I rotate the front hand and come back, and then I turn. Now in practice, that's going to be much smoother. So the turning here that moves my arms, my hands, happens at the same time as the transfer of the weight. But if that's confusing you, forget about the flow of it. Once again, do it like this and like this. Once you've recognized how that connection between your hips and your shoulders functions, then it will be much easier to actually combine them. And then again, if you're comfortable with this, stepping in. Now here, plant the foot down first of all. You can turn the front foot out very, very slightly, push through, and right at the end of the movement, raise the back heel and come in. Turn, bring the hand into position, step back, put the ball of the foot down. As your hand lowers down slightly, lower the heel. Now what you can start to do is to get a sense of linkage between your arms and your legs. I'll exaggerate. As I raise my hand, the rear foot comes in. And then foot pushes back, and as I lower the hand, I lower the foot. Raise in, oops, and lower. That was quite big, which is why I stumbled over. It would remain a small movement. I just wanted you to see the possibility of that connection. And shake out. So you start to get this sort of almost puppet-like feeling. You're here, and it's like that kind of thing, or whatever. You get the idea. So it's quite nice to be able to make those links within your body, and it can feel a bit awkward at first, but then it will start to flow much better. So have your left foot forwards, starting with bird folds its wings. Remember with this one, it really isn't a movement with your arms. You're rotating your arms, but you're not moving them forwards and backwards. And the rotation itself will have this effect in your chest and your upper back. And then fisherman castanet. Here the arms are moving a little bit further, partly through the momentum that they build up, and partly through again this opening and closing in your chest and your upper back. One more time. And then pushing away. One more. And then pulsing the monkey, leaving the hand above the front foot, behind, and then so the hands separate, draw together, separate, and draw together. You feel what's happening in your chest and your upper back in particular as you do that. And then if it's comfortable for you, add in the turn. Sorry, my hand's going off screen now. Yeah, that's better. Good, and bring your feet down. Open your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Side. Inch your back. Down to your hips. Really. Yeah. Going back again just briefly to this inner smile that I mentioned. I have at times been able to kind of get some kind of relief, I suppose you'd call it, those times when maybe you got a bit of a pain in your back or something like that, and by focusing in that way on that area, managed to sort of like just ease it out a little bit, stop it preventing me from going to sleep and that kind of thing. Sometimes I haven't. It depends on what it is that's causing it. Sometimes it just works by me going to sleep, but I don't lay there thinking I must be doing something wrong because kind of like I can't get rid of that sharp pain in my back or something like that. It's just sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It might be down to you, it might be because of the injury or whatever's causing it. So it's just one of those things that is useful to have if you're interested in such things. Get in touch if you want to know more. So, embrace tiger, return to mountain, sinking down, pushing up. Really, from this point onwards, the main focus of attention is that releasing, draining away feeling. And your body's response to the pull of gravity, just noticing when you're likely to start stiffening up. If that isn't working for you, then what else is? Is it the image of the mountain or something I've said in the past or something you've thought of? Whatever is helping you come back to this sense of being nicely centered in your body. One more round. And as always, thank you ever so much, everybody. And do